Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another video with On Point Politics. Make sure to hit the like button to subscribe to the channel and make sure to hit the notification bell so you don't miss another video just like this. Today, we have a special guest on the show, and go ahead and introduce yourself.
Larry Schweikart.
Okay, so what is your background in terms of U.S. politics? I see, if I'm not mistaken, those two books behind you are yours that you've written.
Yeah, there are two of about 30 that I've written. Patriots History of the United States came out in 2004, was a New York Times #1 bestseller for over a month. It's now in its 45th printing, not bad for a 1,000-page history book. My newest book will be out in February. I don't have a copy of the cover up yet, but it's America in the 21st Century. So I'll look at the last 25 years.
Okay. Oh, very nice. Okay, so what are your origins in terms of your political history? Like, when did you really start getting into political analysis and really looking at everything?
Well, I was born in Arizona. I went to Arizona State University with a degree in political science, which taught me absolutely nothing. And the whole time I went to college, I was playing in rock and roll bands, and we immediately went on the road for many years and opened for Steppenwolf and the James Gang and Savoy Brown, and the Who sat through our set at the Troubadour. But it was a hard life, and I wanted to get off the road and play in Phoenix and have a daytime gig that might provide some real money. So I thought I could get a teaching job since I had a degree in political science. And one thing led to another, and the state of Arizona said, well, you need a class in U.S. history. You don't have a class in U.S. history. So I went back to school and got a 6-week class in U.S. history, and it answered all the questions that I had from political science. And so I began work right then as to get a PhD in history, and I wanted to study Jacksonian history, but one thing led to another, and I ended up focused on financial and economic history. My first 5 or 6 books were all in history of banking of the United States, banking and finance, that kind of stuff. And then after I got tenure and I didn't have to write what they hired me to write anymore, I could write about anything. Probably around 2004, I began getting politically active. I had always voted Republican, including for Nixon. But in 2004, I worked with the Rove team in Ohio.
You mean Karl Rove, right?
Yes, Karl Rove in Ohio, which was the crucial state in 2004.
Yes, that's correct.
And I'll never forget, I was assigned one of the most important jobs in the whole state, which was poll flushing. We don't do that now because we have computers. But back then, you'd have to go to the poll and physically write down by 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock how many Republicans out of all the registered Republicans had voted. And so I was assigned a precinct that was one of the bellwether precincts, and not only in Ohio, but in the whole country. And Rove had told us if we get 90% of our voters out in these precincts, we'll win. And so I went, and we had 40% out by 10 o'clock in the morning. And I came back, and at the time I went to one of the more popular sites, which was Free Republic, and they were melting down because of the Drudge Report was saying that John Kerry had carried all of these, Ohio, he was going to win Ohio, he's going to win Florida. I go, well, that's not what I'm seeing.
Right, because the exit polling had showed in 2004, like if I'm not mistaken, the 2004 exit polls were like abysmal. Like they had John Kerry up in Ohio by 5 points. Yep. Like it was like a disaster. Like they were like worse than 2016 exit polling.
Yes, and so I went back at 4 o'clock, and we already by 4 o'clock had 90% of our voters who had voted. So I knew Bush had won Ohio by 4 o'clock. And I kind of made my bones by going on every place I could find saying, hey, Bush has already won the election. I don't know what you guys are talking about, but here's what I've just seen. So I began Steve Bannon and I began to work together a lot in speeches for Young America's Foundation. And eventually we'd be on the same venue a lot, talk politics a lot. Around 2015, I and some other freepers, there were 5 of us, began tracking voter registration data in Iowa, Florida, Ohio, a couple of other states. But the key thing was what we were seeing was that Democrats, based on where they usually were in early voting, were way, way, way down. Yeah, they were still ahead, but compared to where they needed to be in order to win from early voting, we could tell that they were not.
I mean, in 2016, like when they were showing the early voting patterns, like let's say, I don't know the numbers, I really don't. So like, let's say in Iowa, they were ahead in the early vote by like 25 points, which maybe was the case because Obama won them both times.
Right.
But like now the early vote was only like D+10 or something like that.
Right. Well, especially the ones we were watching was Pinellas County in Florida. And at the time, that was a Democrat county. It's hard to believe that the Democrats had a 400,000 or 500,000 vote advantage in Florida in 2012.
Yeah,
today, it's 1.3 million Republicans.
Yeah, it's a humongous shift. Like, look at this, right? Just to bring up your point, I wanted to show you this. Like in 2012, Obama had won the county by 5.5 points.
Right.
And in 2008, he won it by 8. So he did very well there. He even, wow, he won Flagler County? Wow, I didn't even know that. That's crazy. Wow, that's insane. But then in 2016, he flipped it by about a point. Then he lost it to Biden very narrowly. And then Trump won it like very easily this time against Harris. He won it by 5 points. So It was like a slam. It was like an easy victory this time. But it is crazy how much of a shift there's been. Even in like 2004, Bush had like narrowly won it. Like narrowly won it. And it's kind of been like a bellwether county in the state for some time now.
Right.
It's been the last time it wasn't a bellwether in 92 because of the third party from Ross Perot, but you're right. I mean, I wasn't looking at the voter registration data back then, but I would have bet money that you could have seen the early vote data and the voter registration data was probably way more Republican than what it was in 2008 and 2012.
Well, yes, and so we figured out from Hillsdale and from Pinellas County that Trump was going to win Florida, and we figured that out fairly early. And I sent that. I would always send Bannon kind of a wrap up of overnight voting that came in, and he'd always say, "Put it in an email," and I put it in an email and send it to him. And it was clear to us that Trump, this is before Election Day, that he was going to win Florida by 1.5 to 2 points. I mean, that was pretty obvious. And so what was so funny is that, as you know, the first votes that they count are the early votes that have just been sitting there, for a month or so. Right. And that always is going to make the Democrats look good because they always tend to lead in early voting, although it's getting much, much closer these days. But they used to lead. In 2016, they led by a lot. But so I get this call from Bannon's team. They're up in New York at Trump Tower, and he goes, "We're going to lose Florida. It's terrible. Look at the numbers that just dropped." I'm going to calm down. I said, "This is the early vote. We knew it was going to come in like this. What do your numbers say you're going to do in Florida?" He says, "We're going to win by 2. I goes, "Trust your numbers. You're going to win by 2. A few hours later, I'm out walking my dog, and they go, "Hey, you were right. We're going to win Florida by 2. We're going to lose Ohio. Oh my gosh, it's terrible in Ohio." And I knew that they were going to win Ohio by 8 or more. I said, "You're going to win Ohio. Just relax." So I knew by then Trump had won. And this is when I was in a back room on Twitter with Richard Barris and 3 other guys. And we're just looking at this stuff. And we knew by early in the evening that he was going to win Pennsylvania and thus probably win Michigan and Wisconsin as well, which is exactly what happened.
Right, which is what happened because usually they always vote together. I think in 98 or 88, it was like a very unique situation where Wisconsin was just like really liberal that time, and Dukakis was just a certain type of candidate. And he like really drove the turnout out in like the big cities. But other than that, they've
Bush
all
won Wisconsin in '88. He lost Minnesota. I think he lost. Wait a
no,
minute. Let's
they
see.
did not win
Reagan
Wisconsin.
lost Minnesota, and Bush and
Bush did not win.
Dukakis won Massachusetts.
Yes, but Dukakis beat H.W. Bush in Wisconsin by 4 points.
He did.
Yes, he did. I'll show it to you right now.
That's okay. I take your word for it. I just forgot that. I knew
No,
he didn't do very well. He got blown out nationwide.
no, yeah, he did get blown out nationwide, but he did, in fact, win Wisconsin by 4 points. He actually beat H.W. Bush fairly easily. And it was not really even more so because of like the deep blue counties. It was more so he just did really well in like this western part.
Those are your Trump counties now.
Yes, yes, he did very well in those. And somebody like H.W. Bush, who was like basically like a CIA asset and all that stuff, he wasn't going to really do well on his own in those type of places. So that's why Dukakis ended up like outperforming him there like quite substantially. He had a lot of like establishment ties, so he wasn't going to really perform well there on his own. Really, the reason why Bush won '88 was really just because Reagan told everybody to vote for him. That's basically what happened. And then you still saw a massive hemorrhage of voters. Like it was still a like humongous drop off from like '84. And then that's when everybody knew, once H.W. Bush really failed on the whole taxes thing, where he just completely said no more taxes raised, and then he raised taxes, that completely destroyed his coalition. And Ross Perot actually really messed him up in 1992 as well.
The historical record of Perot is pretty mixed. Most historians find that he stole evenly from both Clinton and H.W. Bush. Where Perot made the difference for Clinton was that he dropped out very early because the press was starting to question all of his non-economic points. You know, he was okay on shutting down the border and stuff like that, but he had no real program or no deep plan about anything, and really couldn't talk at length about much of anything. And when that became apparent to the Perot team, they said, you better drop out for a while. So he dropped out, but didn't end his campaign, which allowed him to come back in a couple of months later, after the press had spent all their time beating up H.W. Bush. And then he jumped back in, and the press no longer was going to go after Perot. So he ended up with something like 17 or 18% of the vote.
Yeah, he got a lot. He ended up doing very well that election cycle. I mean, he didn't win any states, but he did very well. He actually he got second place in Maine. He beat Bush in Maine by like 0.05%. It's like right here, which is like very impressive for that time. And then in 1996, they ran Bob Dole, and he lost to Clinton in that election. And then in 2000, it all changed. And this was interesting because this was like obviously really close. And I still sometimes question the results of Florida. I don't know how legitimate the results were there. I think Gore actually probably won Florida. There's a lot of like, even like Quantis Insights. I don't know if you've seen his work from last year, but he even has it to where in like his like incumbent model, like his scoring of the incumbent party, like Al Gore by that model should have actually won 2000 based on all of the points that he had built up.
Well, I've looked at, there's about 20 historical studies done by newspapers and other groups that were postmortems about Florida, and only under one scenario did Gore win Florida. And that was basically if they gave him every single hanging Chad and every single, there was another Chad, I forget what it was, dimpled Chad. If they gave him all of the, in other words, if he got every single questionable vote, he would have won Florida by a handful of votes. But the other, I don't know, 10 or 12 analyses, even by the major papers, agreed that Bush won Florida pretty narrowly. And you have to also remember that the early call of Florida basically disenfranchised thousands and thousands of panhandle voters, because voters in the panhandle vote an hour later than the rest of Florida. And when they began to say that Gore had won, we don't know how many. Rove once thought it was 1 million people did not vote due to the early call of Florida. I don't know if that analysis is right, but it doesn't matter if it's only 20,000 in Florida. That would have put Florida beyond out of reach for Gore. So I think the early call there was just horrific. It was extremely close. It was either 1,035 by one count or 937 by another count. But as I say, nobody has been able to prove that Gore could have won Florida yet.
Oh, wow. Well, I think the official count's like 548 votes that Bush won by. So he won it by less than 1,000 votes, which is honestly like, that's like an insane margin, especially for a big state like Florida. That's like a huge, that's like almost a statistically impossible margin. Like, it's pretty crazy how close it was. And like, even for the time being, like, I mean, New Hampshire went Republican here because Bush in 2000 was actually pretty like, he was not very like pro, like interventionist. He was actually like somewhat of an isolationist, I believe. In 2000, he was like, we got to stop sending our troops into war. Like, he was actually very big about that in 2000, if I remember correctly. So that's why he won New Hampshire at the time. And even Vermont, to an extent, was actually pretty close here. Gore didn't even win it by over 12. He actually only won it by 10 points, which is like a really interesting thing that I noticed like a couple months ago. I never realized how close Vermont actually was in 2000.
Well, you remember that even though Bush is from Texas, his family had a very, very strong presence up in Maine and in this whole area. And he very much was viewed as a Yankee, a blue blood up there, even though, again, he had been in Texas most of his life. So, yeah, I mean, you had these interesting things there. As a historian, the amazing thing to me about the 2000 race is, and it comes back up with Trump and lawfare. The Democrats at times seem to be absolute Napoleons when it comes to using the law. And at other times, they seem like totally incompetent boobs. In Florida, 2000, had they immediately requested a hand recount of the whole state, they could have gotten it. They could have gotten it in underneath the timeline, underneath the clock, and it would never have gone to the Supreme Court. Gore's team screwed up bigly because they asked for a partial recount of only three precincts that were very, very Democratic. And, you know, the butterfly ballot in Palm Beach. I think Miami-Dade was the other one. And I forget what the third one was. But the point is that they got greedy and they went for these three precincts that had a lot of Democrat votes where they were sure they were going to add votes. But they, I'm sure, knew that if they did a complete recount of the whole state, that Bush might come up with a lot more votes as well. So they tried to sneak it in with just these three counties. And the Supreme Court said, no, you either recount all of it or none of it. And by that time, it was too late, and they ruled on the basis of the vote. Yep.
So like legit, they didn't know, like they didn't call it again until after the Supreme Court decision. Like they literally in December had to say that Bush had won Florida.
Right.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So like for a month, no one knew who won, basically. I mean, well, you could have known Bush was going to win, but like I'm talking about your average voter was like, oh, who won?
Right. And the point is that by going after only those three counties, in essence, trying to cheat, they cheated themselves out of the opportunity to do a total statewide recount that may or may not have gone their way. And so we come up to 2021, late 21, early 22, and the Democrats decide they're going to use lawfare to try and get rid of Trump. And by doing so, that set the stage for a series of cataclysmic failures for them. Because by December of 23, we knew that two of the most important cases, the federal cases that involved insurrection, were not going to get to trial before the election because the Supreme Court refused to do the expedited review.
It's kind of like how now they're doing the redistricting and the Democrats are posturing themselves for the redistricting, but they may not be able to do anything about it until after 2026. Like they can't redraw the maps until after. It's the Republican states that actually can redraw their maps right now,
Right.
which is funny. It's kind of like the same thing almost in a way. It's like
Newsom in California has a problem in that the Constitution there requires that they go through a plebiscite, a vote of the people. Right. And I was looking at this morning. So far, only 1/3 of the people support this reapportionment effort in California.
Yeah, I think it's going to fail really bad because I think you're just going to have like super large Republican turnout vote no for it. Like you're going to just have all the Republicans come out and vote no for the new board or the new map. Like, I don't think that's going to go through at all.
But what people forget is that in order to redistrict, you have to take land and voters from this precinct and put them into this precinct. Mm-hmm. And when you move those voters around, yeah, you may get an advantage in Kevin Kiley's district, but you turn around and lose much of your advantage from the other districts.
Right.
And I don't think they thought that through. Seth Keshel, a friend of mine who does this in really great detail, looked at the 5 seats in California that were most likely to be redistricted, including Kiley's and Daladeo's, and found out that the likelihood was that the Democrats put at risk 2 other districts in trying to do this.
Right, because what happens is like if they're drawing the map as if it's going to be like a D+5 year, but if it's like R+2 or R+1, they actually lose way more seats.
So I've been on this kick now since June of 24, and I've argued that the Democrats have 5 civil wars ongoing. Mm-hmm. And the first civil war is the Jews' support for Israel versus Hamas, Palestinians, Gaza, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And they really have trouble winning that on either side. In fact, Biden's kind of walking the line on that probably cost him a couple of cities in Michigan. Looks like the Arab Americans, Muslim Americans turned out more, not wholly, but much more for Trump than they would have.
Or they voted for Biden. Right.
Yeah. The second civil war is the inner city residents versus the illegal aliens. And we saw this in lots of videos popping up out of New York and Chicago right before the election, where the citizens are saying, this isn't fair. You know, in essence, these are our goodies. These are our resources, and you're giving them away to these illegal aliens.
Right.
And the Democrats have been totally unable to divest themselves of illegal alien support. And so they're losing not lots, but remember, this is a game of margins. They're losing enough of these inner city residents to Trump and to the Republicans that it's a problem. The third civil war is this civil war over AI and the guys I call the tech bros, all the Silicon Valley types and people up in the tech corridors who are just crazy. They're gaga over AI. I mean, it is the next big thing. It is here now. It's not going away, but they are totally invested in it. Well, what does that mean? You got to have energy. And the Democrats are not the party of energy right now. They're anti-energy. They're still pushing wind and solar that will not provide anywhere near the kind of energy you need for AI. And by the way, it's just come on my radar as of about 3 weeks ago that we need to be talking about desalination and water, because AI is not just going to use energy. It's going to use water out the wazoo. Texas is already starting to have some problems in that regard. So any smart politician would be advocating building a whole bunch of desalination plants all around that bottom Gulf of America coastline there and start pumping water in for the AI. So now they have a couple more civil wars. One of these is the whole business about Biden being totally incompetent and the staff kept it quiet. So do you as a Democrat criticize that and say that was wrong, you know, they should have removed him, or do you continue to play dumb and say, I didn't know this was all going? That's another civil war that they're going to have to deal with. And then the fifth civil war, which I see no hope for them at all, is just basically a war on men. That for 25 years, the Democrat Party has had a war going on men, masculinity, toxic masculinity, all that stuff. This gets over into the whole transoid movement and the whole woke movement. They're losing that. And when you read all of the Democrat moderates, as I call them, people like Rui Teixeira and Nate Moore and John Halpin, and occasionally, when he's not crazy, James Carville, people like this, they are all saying, get away from woke, back off, get away from this. And they can't do it. They're too wedded to it in their policy and in their statements to even remotely begin to back away from that. So they've got big, big problems.
Right, because the problem is that you have their brand has completely gone down since 2008. I mean, in 2008, Obama didn't even support same-sex marriage.
Right.
Even though he was the major proponent of it in 2012. Like, the party completely, somehow in 2008, from 2012, the party completely changed after Obama got reelected, and it started becoming this like political identity party. And they really leaned into that in 2016, and that really messed them up in 2016. And they didn't realize that somebody like Trump could perform well enough to actually ended up narrowly eking them out in 2016. And you had a lot of people that were skeptical of him in 2016, and he still ended up beating Clinton, who wasn't like, I mean, she wasn't the best candidate, but she wasn't the worst candidate. I'd argue Kamala Harris was like a significantly worse candidate. Even like Joe Biden 2020, I would have argued he was a worse candidate in 2016 Clinton. Forget Biden in 24. I mean, I had Biden losing like I had Trump winning 350 electoral votes against Biden or something like that. Like, I had like a huge win for Trump against Biden. But then Harris, they replaced Harris with no primary, and then she ended up narrowing it up somehow. She turned out like a couple people who were going to vote for RFK, and, you know, some of the liberals that were going to vote for RFK, and a couple like disaffected Black voters for the most part, who kind of ended up turning out at the end. But Trump still kind of ended up pretty much beating her. And people, they try to make it seem, oh, well, since he only won Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania by 0 to 2 points, it was actually still kind of close. But like, to be honest, for today's standards, Trump winning Pennsylvania by 2 points is like very impressive.
It's incredible, because Pennsylvania was Democrat 1.1 million back a little before 2016. That's just astounding. And we're on a trajectory right now, given how fast the Republicans are closing the gap. It was something like, I don't know, 80,000 last time I looked. They're on a trajectory now to turn Pennsylvania slightly red by 2026. It's just amazing.
And I've actually,
the biggest issue is not per se Pennsylvania, but it is if you take every single one of the 29 states where we can follow voter registration statistics, with just a couple of little blips, they are all moving to the right consistently and big. And the two blips were New Jersey and Pennsylvania when they had their primaries. And for a month period in each case, the Democrats got out the vote for their primary, and now they're falling back behind again.
They fell back behind. Right. That's all it was. It was literally just that. And it's very interesting, because even about like Pennsylvania, I had actually said on July 28th that Josh Shapiro was not guaranteed to win re-election. I had said that on my X at the end of July, before Stacey Garrity had even announced she was going to run. That is going to prove my point a lot more. I don't expect him to lose right now, but I definitely think with him and Stacey Garrity, I think that race is going to be within 6 points. I think I posted a video today about the governorships, and I think he's probably going to beat her by only 3 or 4 points. Like, it's a way closer margin than what he beat Mastriano by.
Well, Mastriano was not a great candidate. Right. I don't know anything about Garrity yet. I'm just following the voter registration statistics, but Shapiro is for the left what Trump is for the right, which is that he says a lot of the right things that would appeal to enough blue collar voters and middle of the road voters. He sounds sensible, sort of like a Fetterman. And so he will take a lot of those people that McCormick, for example, won.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a crazy election result, given the fact that Bob Casey had won very easily last time. Like, McCormick legit beat him, and if it wasn't for Scott Presler, McCormick would have lost that race.
Yeah, Presler is a national treasure, and but I will say that McCormick ran a phenomenal race. He didn't say anything stupid. He didn't get out there on any extreme position that would have killed him with some people who wanted to vote for him, but couldn't get caught with some weird statement.
Right, no, and he didn't. So that also helped him out massively too.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the Democrats, and I'll mention two things. Number one, it actually came out not that long ago that Apple iOS 26, they're going to update it to where you can put political advertising or like political fundraising text messages as spam. And that was a big deal for me and pollsters, because like people who poll with SMS, that's going to completely screw them over. And luckily for SoCal Strategies and we haven't used SMS yet. So we're in the clear. But a lot of pollsters who use SMS, that's going to mess them up. And then it's going to really mess up political fundraising by like a substantial amount, because that's like a big way that they fundraise now. So
this is why Trump is doing it himself. This is why he already has 1.4 billion.
That's crazy. Yeah,
which is astounding.
It's at 1.6 now. I think it's at 1.6 now.
Yeah, well, but let me go back to your polling here, because I think that even now, a lot of pollsters, even on our side, even some of the good ones like Rasmussen and People's Pundit, Big Data, are not getting Trump in full. I mean, this was borne out in 2016 with Trafalgar, when they asked the famous question, who do you plan to vote for? And then, who do you think your neighbor will vote for? And there's still a lot of shy Trump people out there who don't want to be attacked or, excuse me, let me shut this off, attacked or ridiculed or whatever. Right. And so I just think Trump is always underpolled by 2 to 3 points. It's just, and it's been proven now through 2 elections. He's just always underpolled everywhere. Of course, we were just throwing out 2020 because nobody knows what happened in 2020.
Right. Well, what's funny is that I actually had a website where we aggregated like his 2020 approval. And on election day, his national approval rating, when we aggregated all of the accurate polls and stuff, he's at a 50% national approval rating. They said he was like at 45, 46. We had him at like 49, 50. Yeah. And Biden supposedly would have been at like, if we had aggregated his like approval ratings at the time, he would have been like at 53, 54. So you could have kind of like predicted Biden winning the national popular vote by 4, but also you had the mail-in ballots. And it's kind of like that election's very weird because they had Biden doing like super well in the polling. Like he was up 8, 9 points. And I think they purposely did that so that like if they're, because I think they tried to cheat it in that election. It was still really close. They probably just thought he was going to do worse than he actually did in terms of like his raw vote. And I think the polling industry really pushed that Biden was going to win by a lot, so that because I think they probably expected Trump to get like 68 million votes, 67. I think that's what they were actually predicting him to get, which would have produced the like 8-point win that the polling averages had. And they could have said, oh, look, the polls were right. And he lost in this like big landslide, and that didn't happen. And so it was,
well, I mean, I think the story of the 2020 election is that as badly as in 2024, the Democrats latched on to lawfare and went totally down a bad road that started the entire party on collapse. I think in 2020, they very early picked a strategy of we're going to use COVID to our advantage. We're going to go around and start scouting nursing homes, apartment buildings, and get addresses for every single person or non-person so that they could vote them later. And so I don't believe in the machine theft of 2020. I believe it was done the old-fashioned way,
Yeah,
with the mules.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think that's true. I don't think the voting machines were tampered with. I think they literally got a bunch of hand ballots, and like most of them don't verify your signature. You can just drop them off, like, and they'll count it because it doesn't have a name on it. So it's like it's actually ridiculously easy for them to cheat in elections like that. It's like super easy for them to cheat. Like I'm sure they probably robbed them of like 20,000 votes in Wisconsin. I'm sure they did. That's not, especially if they had a whole year of COVID to like slowly build up all the mail-in ballots. It's not that hard to actually. Now there are people that say, "Oh, he would have won 330 electoral votes if there was no fraud." That's not true. He probably, if there was no fraud, he probably would have won like 269 to 269. Maybe he would have won Pennsylvania, but I think he would have at least lost one of the Rust Belt states. He would have lost one of them. I think he probably still would have lost Michigan. I think Michigan, he wasn't going to win it that year. It was too, like, I think it was too gone for him, that one. But if it was completely fair, he probably would have just gone Georgia, Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and that would have been in. He would have still been elected.
Yeah, I think it's one of the great mercies of God Almighty that Trump lost that election.
Yeah.
Because had he come into that election, he would have had mostly the same cabinet, the same group of backstabbers, the same Mike Pences, the same John Boltons, the same people who were constantly giving him bad advice and taking him down the wrong roads. Secondly, the loss in such a fashion so enraged him and so motivated him that now this time around, as you saw from his statement earlier today on Truth, he's going after mail-in voting and he's going after Dominion.
And so, honestly, if he's actually able to do that and he just gets rid of mail-in votes, oh man.
Well, so we have, and I try to explain this to Republican groups. I think the Democrats are so screwed. I honestly believe we may be watching the extinction of a major political party for the first time in 200 years. First of all, you have deportations. And today it was announced that 1.6 million had voluntarily deported. And Tom Homan's guys have taken out another 400,000 or 500,000. So you're looking at so far 2 million illegal aliens gone.
If that's true, if that's actually true, that's like huge because it's only
massive. It would never continue as a straight line. But if it continued as a straight line, you'd be looking at something like 10 or 12 million illegal aliens gone by the end of Trump's term, which would be, that alone would sink the Democrat Party.
Oh yeah, that alone would win Vance 2028. And like, you know, there's people online, you know what I'm talking about. There's people online that have concerns that he's not deporting enough people, like the Groypers and those kind of people. But it's like, again, like I understand their concerns, but if it's true that really they have deported like 2.2 million people or they're gone, then it's like, it's been 6 months and he's already deported like 66% of what Obama deported in 2 months.
Right.
In 2 months.
So
that's like
that's one factor, just a huge factor that the Democrats have to overcome. Second factor they have to overcome is, as you said earlier, their party is extremely toxic. They're depending on which survey you look at, they're at 21% favorability, 19% favorability. But to heck with that, just look at the voter registration numbers. 29 states, and they're all moving the same way. That should tell you something right there. And states like Arizona and Florida are just completely off the map now.
Right. And it's like now heading into like, the midterms in 2028. I don't think 2026 is going to be a blue wave year. I think it'll probably, right now it's a D+4 ballot. If it was held today, I think they win the generic ballot by 4. But I think by the time we get there, it may be like tied or D+1, something like that.
Well, you're looking, first of all, at probably out of the 5 seats in Texas, Republicans are going to win 4 of those. You're looking at 3 seats in Ohio. Republicans are definitely going to win 2 of those. One of them is Marcy Kaptur, and she won by 0.0 something rather. So right there are 6 seats: Cook, has the number of safe Republican seats at 2012. So right there, you're looking at a safe Republican House. Now, Missouri, Indiana, and Florida are all looking at redistricting, and that would add another anywhere from 3 to 5 seats. And that's without any toss-ups. Now, the problem with the toss-ups is how many of those redistricted seats would be toss-ups, like Marcy Kaptur's seat would be a toss-up seat. So I haven't yet seen, I'll ask Seth to do an analysis of this, but how many, after you redistrict, how many seats are really genuinely going to be toss-ups? I've held for some time that Republicans are definitely going to hold the House. I think they may win a net of end up like 220, 225. And if things really go well in the economy in the next 17 months, you're looking at plus 10. But we're, for Republicans, but we're past the point, I think, given gerrymandering, where you're ever going to see again somebody win, 150 seats in the off-year election. That's just not going to happen again.
No, yeah, the electorate's too polarized for that. Now, I do want to get to your comment before we end the show, because I know you got to go soon, but you had said on my comment on my post about 2028 that you believe Vance is going to win 320 to 340 electoral votes. Now, we all know he's probably going to be the nominee for the Republicans, and I think he's probably going to pick Marco Rubio for VP. But who do you think is going to be the Dem nominee? Because right now the front runner is Pete Buttigieg in the polling, but it's like by very narrow margins, and he has 0 Black voter support.
That's crazy.
So if that happens, I mean, it's obviously not 0. Like, it's just a very insignificant amount of Democrat primary voters that vote for him. Nationwide, he probably get like 50,000 Black voters or something like ridiculously small in the primary. But he's doing so much better with white voters that he could like legitimately win in a contested primary and just like straight up take it. And like it would, like, how Hispanics move this election like 30 points. You would see the Black vote move like 20 points Republican. And it would be the craziest looking map. Like, I think Iowa and Ohio would be like a little bit to the left of what they were in 24, but like Virginia would be a toss up again. Like, it would look super funny.
Well, remember with Virginia, and this is so I mentioned deportations. I mentioned voter registration trends. There's a third trend that's going on, which is that Trump, in his reorganization and shrinkage of the federal government, has already removed 200,000 government jobs. Now, how many of those government jobs are in Northern Virginia? Even if it's half, and you take 100,000 off the Democrat rolls, and you take another 50,000 for illegal aliens, and you start adding all this stuff up, and all of a sudden places like New Mexico and Virginia and Maine and New Hampshire all become not only gettable, but very much toss-ups. I agree that JD will have different appeal than Trump would, but he's going to have very much the same hillbilly elegy appeal to the working class of all groups. He's even though he says things that are every bit as flamboyant as Trump does, he doesn't say them in the same way, and he kind of gets a pass on that a lot. And it doesn't bother me that Trump says this stuff. So who's the Democrat nominee? I think it's going to be Newsom. And I think that'll be a disaster for them to have California dragged around their neck through an entire election. It's going to be bad.
Yeah, again, they're going to have it again for another San Francisco liberal. Again, the second time they do that. It's like, well, I mean, but it's the only reason why he's going to win the primary is because the other candidates are so bad, even compared to Newsom, that he's just going to clear. That's the only reason why. I've said this, and I don't know if you'd agree with me. I'm pretty sure you know who Stephen A. Smith is, the ESPN commentator. I actually believe that he would be their best pick because I think he would be able to kind of do this Trump 2016 thing where everybody would think he's a joke, but then he'd be in the primary debates and people would start liking him, and then he'd win the primary with like 45-50% in a contested primary. Stephen A. wins the primary. But I think Stephen A would actually be able to reverse a lot of the losses of the Democrat Party with like some Hispanic and Black voters. He'd do worse with white voters, but I think he'd do better with the minority groups. And I think he'd actually give Vance a run for his money. I think he would actually unironically be their best choice. And this is the first time I announced this in like March or February. I got a text from a Stephen A. Smith exploratory committee in like March. So he's planning on running, like he is.
Well,
but I don't know what your opinion on that is, but I actually
disagree. And of course, I'm a Cowboys fan, so I hate Stephen A. Smith to start with. But I think that he plays the role of the angry Negro, and that will not sit well at all with white voters or with milquetoast voters who are even somewhat moderate. They want to get along. They can't. We reach across the aisle, and he would have every bit of that Trump anger and off-puttedness, but at a whole different level. I just think he has no shot. I think Newsom's probably going to be the guy, but he's so shifty in all of his positions. Plus, he has California as a record. So good luck.
Right. And that's because it's not even so much about his because it just as a political athlete, like presenting himself and like speaking, he's a lot better than Harris, but his record is just so much worse than even Harris. Like it's just, I have a friend, a good friend of mine actually said, she literally was like, I don't know how I voted for Trump in 24. I don't know if I'm going to vote for Vance. Like, I'm not really, because she's like Hispanic like me. And she voted for Trump because she didn't like Kamala. And she actually likes Trump to a degree, but she didn't agree with him revoking the visas that Biden had put, those like 500K visas, which I actually thought wasn't a good move either. That's my opinion. Because those people, most of them did actually do the process and get here legally. So I didn't think that was the right move. So she's been very iffy about that. And it's actually affected her somewhat. But she had said, if it's Newsom, I'm not voting for Newsom. Like, I will vote for Vance if it's Newsom. She said, anybody else, I'll at least give them a chance.
Yeah.
And she didn't even know if she'd vote for Vance, but she said that if it's Newsom, she's 100% voting for Vance. Or if it's Harris again, she's like even for sure voting Vance. Like she actually, those two, Harris and Newsom, she said she'd 100% vote for Vance over them.
Yeah, here's the thing with the H-1Bs. In previous years, if you wanted to cut taxes for ordinary Americans, you had to find a way to have a big tax hit on the rich. So they couldn't say, oh, these are tax cuts for the rich. And it's the same thing with you can't deport so many people and then turn around and say, but you rich tech companies, you get away with it because these are H-1B visas. I'm not saying they'll get rid of them, but they are going to put them under much more scrutiny as I hate to use the word SOP, but as a concession to all of those who, worked in tech. And for years, we had so many stories of white males who had just been fired and had to train their Indian replacements. And those stories really resonate with the people, and they don't like that stuff at all. So that's the purpose of those H-1B visa cuts.
Right. Oh, no, I wasn't talking about H-1B visas. It was like a bunch of Cubans, Nicaraguans, Venezuelans. It wasn't H-1B visas.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a different thing. It wasn't H-1B visas. But either way, I guess that's pretty much it for now. Thank you very much, Larry, for coming on the show. I thought we had a pretty good discussion. Very knowledgeable about history and politics. And guys, make sure to go ahead and hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you want more content just like this, and hit the notification bell. And where can we follow you on your social medias, Larry?
Okay, I've got a site called Wild World of Politics. And if you sign up for my Larry's Commentary video 3 days a week, you'll automatically get signed up to my subscription Substack, where I publish deeper analysis three times a week. If you're into history, I have Wild World of History, where people can get a homeschool curriculum in U.S. history based on my Patriots History of the United States. And if nothing else, buy me a coffee. There's a place on the side to buy me a coffee. All of our coffee money is going to turning Patriots history into a movie where we follow one family all the way from Plymouth to the present.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Thank you so much and have a good one.
Thank you.